An envelope? Vanessa laughed so loudly half the room turned toward me. Seriously, Tyra, Grandpa left everyone else millions and gave you stationery. I looked down at the yellowed envelope. The estate attorney had just slid across the table. Minutes earlier, Dad had been awarded $4 million. Mom received investment accounts worth more than I could comfortably imagine. Vanessa got $2.7 million and Grandpa Arthur's vacation property. Now every eye in the room was on me. I broke the seal. No check. No deed. Just a phone number in Grandpa's handwriting and 2 words beneath it. Call alone. Dad leaned back with a smirk. Maybe your grandfather finally realized you weren't equipped to handle real money. Mom gave me a thin smile. At least he remembered you, Tyra. Be grateful. Then Vanessa glanced at my worn handbag and aging car through the window. Must be the number for some shelter for you to live in. The laughter that followed made something inside me go quiet. Grandpa's framed photograph sat 6 feet away beside white flowers, yet my relatives were already discussing what they would buy. An uncle wanted a new SUV. Someone else was planning renovations. Vanessa was debating whether to sell the vacation house or turn it into a luxury rental. I stayed silent because silence was what I had learned to do around my family. I was 29, hardworking, financially ordinary, and according to Dad, permanently behind Vanessa. She had always been the successful daughter. I was the one everyone expected to need help eventually. What none of them mentioned was that I had been the person driving Grandpa to appointments when his knees became too painful for long trips. I brought his groceries, fixed his phone whenever he accidentally changed the settings. And every Sunday evening, I sat in his study listening to stories about business deals from decades ago that everyone else called boring. I had never asked him what those stories were worth. Apparently, everyone else had. Dad stood and raised his glass. Well, he announced, now that everything is settled, we need to discuss how this family is going to manage Arthur's legacy. I stared at the envelope. For one awful moment, I wondered if I had misunderstood Grandpa completely. Maybe those Sundays had meant more to me than they had to him. I slipped the envelope into my bag and walked out without saying goodbye. My old sedan felt almost embarrassingly small after the numbers I had just heard inside. I sat behind the wheel, staring at the unfamiliar phone number. Maybe it led to a tiny trust. Maybe some forgotten piece of property. Maybe Grandpa had simply recorded a final message he wanted me to hear privately. My hand moved toward the passenger seat. I nearly tossed the envelope aside. Instead, I typed the number. 1 ring. A man answered. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask who was calling. He simply said, "Tyra Bennett, I've been waiting for your call air." "I think you have the wrong person," I said. The man on the other end didn't hesitate. "No, Ms. Bennett, I don't." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Who are you?" "My name is Elias Grant. I was your grandfather's private attorney and trustee." That made me sit straighter. I had never heard Grandpa mention him. What exactly did he leave me? There was a pause. That is not something I'm authorized to explain over the phone. My heart sank a little. Of course. Maybe Vanessa had been right. Maybe this was some tiny account wrapped in unnecessary mystery. Then Elias said, "Bring the original envelope to my office tomorrow morning. Do not copy it. Do not photograph it." I looked down at the yellow paper in my lap. "Why?" His voice lowered. "Because your grandfather designed this process very carefully." I glanced toward Grandpa's house. Through the front windows, I could still see my family moving around with drinks in their hands. Then Elias added, "Do not give that envelope to anyone, especially your family." The call ended a minute later. When I went back inside for my coat, Dad was waiting near the hallway. "Who did you call?" I stopped. His smile was gone. Someone Grandpa wanted me to speak with. Who? I have a meeting tomorrow. Dad held out his hand. Give me the envelope. I stared at him. What? I'm Arthur's son. If he left something that affects the estate, I need to see it. No. The word came out before I could soften it. Dad's face changed. He wasn't used to hearing that from me. Tyra, don't start acting important because somebody gave you a phone number. Then why do you want it? For once, he had no immediate answer. He recovered quickly. I helped you after college. I've bilayed you out before. Now you're suddenly keeping secrets over a worthless piece of paper. Before I could reply, Vanessa walked over. She smiled like she was trying to calm a child. Tyra, I can drive you tomorrow. You shouldn't go alone if you don't know who this man is. I'll manage. Her smile tightened. Dad looked at her, then back at me. That was when I understood something. They had laughed at the envelope. But neither of them was laughing anymore. That night, I laid it beneath my desk lamp and studied every inch. The paper was old but thick. Near the bottom, almost hidden in the texture, was a tiny embossed symbol. 3 narrow lines forming a geometric crest. I knew it. Grandpa had the same mark on several black folders he kept locked in his study. Years ago, I had pointed to one and asked what it meant. He had smiled and closed the drawer. Just the work that keeps everything else standing. At the time, I assumed he meant investments. Now I wasn't so sure. I touched the embossed mark and looked again at the phone number. If Dad truly believed this envelope was worthless, he wouldn't have demanded it. If Vanessa truly thought it was a joke, she wouldn't have offered to drive me. And if Grandpa had hidden the same symbol on documents his own children never discussed, what exactly had he built that even his family didn't know existed? The next morning, I stood inside the lobby of Grant and Mercer wondering if I had written down the wrong address. I had expected a small law office. Instead, a receptionist escorted me through secured glass doors and into a private executive conference room. 3 people were waiting. A silver-haired man stood first. Tyra Bennett, I'm Elias Grant. Beside him sat 2 trustees and a corporate accountant. My stomach tightened. This was suddenly much bigger than an old envelope. Elias didn't explain immediately. He examined the original envelope, checked my identification, then asked me to read Grandpa's handwritten instruction aloud. Call alone. Only then did he sit. Your grandfather maintained a second estate structure, Elias said, completely separate from the assets distributed yesterday. I stared at him. A second estate. In practical terms, yes. How much money are we talking about? Elias shook his head. Your grandfather didn't leave you a check, Tyra. He left you responsibility. Before I could ask what that meant, the conference phone rang. Elias answered. His expression hardened. I understand. Keep them in reception. Who? He looked directly at me. Your parents and sister. My chair scraped backward. Minutes later, I stepped into reception and found Dad already arguing with an employee. Vanessa spotted me. There she is. How did you find me? I searched Elias Grant, she said. It wasn't difficult. Dad moved toward me. We're joining this meeting. No, you are. His face reddened. If Arthur hid assets from his family, his children have a right to know. Elias stepped beside me. Mr. Bennett, you have no authorization to attend. Dad pointed at me. She manipulated him. She was constantly at his house near the end. Now suddenly there's some secret inheritance. The receptionist looked up. 2 employees nearby went silent. Vanessa folded her arms. Grandpa was vulnerable. Who knows what Tyra convinced him to sign? Enough, Elias said. His voice wasn't loud, but the room went still. Arthur Bennett established this arrangement years before his final illness. He reaffirmed it repeatedly, and underwent independent legal review confirming his capacity. Dad's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Ilya's turned toward security. Please escort our visitors from the private floor. Dad stared at me as the guards approached. Tyra, don't sign anything until the real family understands what he did. The real family. Yesterday, my inheritance had been a joke. Today, they had followed me across town to get inside the room where it was being explained. I returned to the conference table. Elias closed the door. Then he placed a thick black binder in front of me. Stamped into its cover was the same symbol hidden on Grandpa's envelope. I believe, Elias said, you've seen this mark before. He opened the binder. Across the first page stretched a corporate ownership chart. One company branched into another, then another, properties, holdings, subsidiaries, investment entities. Dozens of them. And sitting above the entire structure was one name. Arthur Bennett. I stared at Elias. Grandpa hadn't hidden a little extra money. He had hidden an entire business world. What am I looking at? Elias turned the binder toward me. 40 years of your grandfather's work. He moved his finger down the ownership chart. Warehouse properties. Industrial land. Logistics companies. Commercial buildings. Private stakes in regional businesses. At the center of everything was one name. Bennett Meridian Group. Arthur rarely owned major assets personally, Elias explained. He acquired them through companies, then consolidated those interests beneath Bennett Meridian. Suddenly, yesterday's inheritance made sense. The family had been celebrating Grandpa's visible wealth. His largest assets had never been sitting in his personal name. I turned another page, then stopped. I know this address. Elias nodded. It was the commercial building where Dad's company operated. Bennett Meridian owns it. I looked at him. My father rents from Grandpa's company. At unusually favorable terms, personally approved by Arthur. Another subsidiary name caught my attention. Vanessa's event company. That one. Financing, Elias said. Bennett Meridian holds the agreement supporting part of her business. I leaned back. Yesterday, Vanessa had joked that Grandpa left me the number for a shelter. She didn't even know the company behind her own financing was connected to the envelope she mocked. Then another memory surfaced. Grandpa asking me over dinner, what happens when a company borrows too much? Another Sunday, would you protect 100 jobs if selling the company made you personally richer? I had thought he enjoyed testing my opinions. He was evaluating me, I whispered. Elias slid several dated documents across the table. He began restructuring this years ago. My eyes moved over signatures, amendments, and trustee records. Then Elias pushed a final set of papers toward me. There is a decision you must make. What decision? You may accept Arthur's controlling interest under the terms he established, or decline it. And if I decline, it transfers to an institutional trust. I frowned. Could I divide it with my family? No. That answer came immediately. Arthur specifically prohibited that option. He did not want pressure from relatives resulting in the company being broken apart. The room went quiet. Dad demanding my envelope suddenly felt very different. Vanessa offering to drive me felt different. Even Grandpa's insistence that I call alone made sense. I looked at Elias. Why me? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into a secured case and removed a sealed video file. Arthur anticipated that question. Before starting it, Elias turned one final corporate document toward me. My eyes landed on a line near the bottom. Arthur Bennett, voting interest, asterisk. There was a percentage beside it. Before I could read the number aloud, Elias pressed play. Grandpa appeared on the screen. Grandpa looked healthier in the recording than he had during his final months. He sat behind the desk, where I had spent so many Sunday evenings listening to him talk. Tyra, he began, if you're watching this, Elias has shown you Bennett Meridian. My throat tightened. Grandpa folded his hands. The money and property distributed to the family were assets I was willing to let go. They can spend them, sell them, enjoy them. Bennett Meridian is different. It is my life's work. He explained how he had spent more than 40 years building the company quietly, buying commercial property, warehouses and industrial land, investing in logistics businesses, and acquiring stakes in companies he believed could last. Then his expression changed. As I grew older, I noticed something. He paused. People began visiting me with questions about instead of questions about me. I looked down. I knew exactly who he meant. But you never asked. Grandpa reminded me of the grocery runs, appointments, and Sunday evenings. Things I had never considered important enough to count. You helped when there was nothing being offered in return. You listened when there was nothing to gain. Then he leaned slightly toward the camera. So I didn't choose the person who wanted the most from me. I chose the person I trusted most with what I built. The recording ended. Nobody spoke. I stared at the yellow envelope beside my hand. Finally, Elias turned the corporate document fully toward me. Arthur transferred his controlling interest into the trust, nomming you beneficiary and controlling shareholder. I looked at the percentage. Asterisk 62%. And the current, independent valuation attributable to that interest. Elias placed another report beside it. Approximately $184 million asterisk. I actually read the number twice. Yesterday, my family had laughed because I hadn't received a check. Grandpa had never intended the envelope to contain my inheritance. It was simply the authentication key that led me to it. I picked up the acceptance documents. My hand trembled once. Then I signed. A formal family meeting was arranged because existing Bennett Meridian agreements now required approval from its controlling shareholder. Dad arrived ready for a fight. Vanessa looked at the yellow envelope beside me and gave a nervous laugh. So this is what all the drama was about. Elias switched on the presentation screen. The Bennett Meridian corporate structure appeared. Dad stopped talking. Elias explained the trust. Then the asterisk 62% controlling interest appeared. Mom gripped the edge of the table. Vanessa's smile vanished. Finally, the valuation appeared. $184 million. Dad stared at it. No. Nobody answered. He looked at Elias. Arthur gave Tyra control of all this. Yes. Recently. No. The structure was established years ago and repeatedly reaffirmed through independent legal review. Dad slowly sat back. Then Elias opened the existing commercial agreements. Dad's expression changed again when his company address appeared. Your current lease, Elias explained, is held through a Bennett Meridian subsidiary. Arthur personally approved the preferential terms. It is approaching renewal. Vanessa stopped breathing for a second when her company appeared next. And Bennett Meridian holds the financing agreement supporting your business. Yesterday, they had thought I was the only person at the table who had received nothing useful. Now they were discovering that parts of their own comfortable lives had been resting on Grandpa's hidden empire. Dad turned toward me. His voice became noticeably softer. Tyra, family assets should remain family decisions. I held his gaze. Yesterday, you said my inheritance was a joke. His jaw tightened. Vanessa leaned forward. So what happens to us now? I could have used the moment to humiliate them. I didn't. Nothing unfair. Dad looked confused. Your company can renew its lease, I said, at normal commercial terms. I turned toward Vanessa. And your financing continues under the same standards Bennett Meridian applies to everyone else. So no family consideration, Dad asked. There was plenty of family consideration before Grandpa died. I closed the folder. I'm ending the special treatment, not your businesses. That was the difference Grandpa had trusted me to understand. I wasn't going to destroy something valuable just because I finally had the power to do it. But I wasn't going to let anyone use family as an excuse to control me again. Months later, I still wasn't pretending I could walk into a company worth that much and instantly know everything. I kept Grandpa's experienced executive team. I attended meetings, studied financial reports, visited warehouses and properties, asked questions, and whenever decisions affected employees, I remembered the conversations Grandpa had started years earlier without telling me they were lessons. My relationship with Dad, Mom, and Vanessa never returned to what it had been. It couldn't. Money hadn't created the distance between us. It had simply exposed what was already there. In my office at Bennett Meridian, I eventually framed one thing. Not the valuation. Not the ownership certificate. The yellow envelope. I kept it where I could see Grandpa's handwriting. Call alone. My family had looked at that envelope and seen proof that I mattered least. Grandpa had used it to tell me exactly the opposite. They laughed because Grandpa left me an envelope instead of a check. They never understood that the checks were what he gave away. The empire was what he trusted me to keep.